There are moments in life when it feels as though everything around you is trying to take from you the very thing you most need to preserve: peace. It is not only the problem itself that hurts, it is the silent effect it begins to create within you. An unexpected piece of news changes the rhythm of your mind. A disappointment alters the atmosphere of your whole day. A difficult season disrupts not only your plans, but also your balance, your clarity, and even the way you breathe through life itself. And perhaps what is most distressing about all of this is realizing that when hardship drags on, you are no longer fighting only to solve something. You are fighting not to lose yourself. You are trying to remain whole while some part of you feels tired, anxious, pressured, overwhelmed, or emotionally exhausted. And this is exactly where many people get confused, because they believe overcoming hard times means ending the pain as quickly as possible, eliminating every discomfort, returning to total control, or preventing life from disrupting their plans. But overcoming does not always mean stopping the storm. Sometimes overcoming means walking through it without handing it control of your soul. And that changes everything. Because when you understand that difference, you stop measuring your strength only by the absence of problems and begin measuring it by your ability to remain at peace, even while life is still unfolding. And if this speaks to something real you are living through right now, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments which situation has most been challenging your inner peace. Because many times the first step toward recovering your center is honestly recognizing what has been trying to steal it. There is a detail here that very few people truly understand. Losing your peace does not happen all at once. It almost always happens, little by little. A person does not collapse only because of the big problem. They wear themselves down through the small inner concessions they make every day. They let the mind spin without limits. They feed painful scenarios. They react to every piece of news, every fear, every negative possibility, as if everything deserves immediate access to the center of their being. And before they realize it, they are no longer just facing a difficult season. They are living emotionally colonized by it. The problem stepped out of the external world and built a home within. That is why inner peace is not the absence of pain. Inner peace is the protection of territory. It is knowing that no matter how hard the season becomes, it cannot be given unrestricted access to your inner world. Stoicism always pointed to this truth with powerful clarity. You do not control everything that happens, but you still get to choose what you will do with what happens inside you. And perhaps that is one of the most liberating ideas a person can carry during hard times, because it returns the focus to the right place. It brings it back inward, not to generate guilt, but to restore sovereignty, not to deny reality, but to prevent external reality from automatically becoming internal disorder. Maybe that is exactly what you are living right now. Something is difficult, and your mind cannot rest. You try to move through the day, but there is a constant tension underneath everything. You do your tasks, talk to Payopley, handle what needs to be handled, but deep down, you feel that peace has drifted farther away, as if there were always a weight turning in the background. A fear without a clear name. A worry that does not loosen its grip. A feeling that your energy has been hijacked by something that still has not been resolved. And this is where a decisive shift begins. Hard moments do not steal your peace only because of what they are. They steal your peace, mainly when they convince you that you must live fused with them all the time. When they make you believe that thinking without stopping is care. That suffering in advance is preparation. That imagining every possible negative scenario is responsibility. That carrying the problem every minute of the day is proof that you are taking life seriously. But it is not. Many times, that is simply exhaustion disguised as vigilance. It is anxiety pretending to be control. It is the mind consuming itself in the hope that if it keeps thinking, it will find a solution faster. But it almost never works that way. Excessive thinking does not bring peace. It brings saturation, and a saturated soul can no longer clearly discern what truly needs to be addressed and what is merely being fed. Marcus Aurelius understood something fundamental for anyone who wants to overcome hard times without losing their center. The problem is not only in the event itself, but in the way the mind carries it. That does not mean minimizing the pain. It does not mean pretending everything is fine. It simply means understanding that there is an enormous difference between feeling the impact of something and allowing that impact to dominate your entire inner landscape. You may be living through something hard and still not need to hand over your entire identity to it. You may be going through loss, uncertainty, pressure, disappointment, or crisis, and still preserve some space within yourself where chaos does not command everything. And that space is precious. Because that is where the right response is born. That is where clarity is born. That is where a kind of strength is born that does not depend on excitement, but on depth. There is a very common mistake in hard times. A person tries to recover peace by resolving the external before organizing the internal. They want everything to fit first, for people to change, for answers to come, for the situation to improve. for the outcome to appear. Only then do they allow themselves to breathe. Only then do they permit themselves to rest inwardly. But life rarely works that way. There are seasons when the external takes time to align. And if your peace depends exclusively on that, you will live at war all the time. The more mature path is different. It is learning to create peace within the imperfect process, within the waiting, within the uncertainty, within the crossing itself. Not because the situation has become good, but because you decided it would not have the right to destroy everything in you while it is still happening. And here, one of the most difficult and most powerful truths of immaturity appears. Not every problem needs to become a crisis of the soul. That sounds obvious when said aloud, but almost no one lives that way. Most people take a real difficulty and turn it into emotional identity. The problem stops being something they are living through and becomes something that defines the value of their entire life. A delay becomes failure. A loss becomes total collapse. A hard moment becomes a permanent conclusion. And that is how peace is lost. Not only because of the fact itself, but because of the existential size the mind gives to the fact. Epictetus said that it is not things themselves that disturb us, but the judgments we make about them. And when you truly understand that, you begin to observe more carefully what you are adding to your pain, what actually happened, and what does your mind build around it? What is reality? And what is already fear? Extreme interpretation, anticipation, dramatization, painful memory mixed into the present moment. That question is a key, because many times you are not suffering only from what is in front of you. You are suffering also from everything your imagination, your emotional hunger, your anxiety, or your need for control piled on top of the situation. And when you begin separating fact from narrative, the fog starts to thin. The weight may still remain, but it no longer grows so large inside you. Perhaps one of the most useful images for this moment is this. Your inner peace is like a flame protected deep within. The winds of life may blow hard. Problems may arise. People may disappoint you. The future may become uncertain. The body may grow tired. The heart may ache. But even then, there is a difference between feeling the wind and surrendering the flame. What many people do without realizing it is open their hand every time hardship intensifies. Instead of protecting that flame, they begin blowing along with the problem. They feed the desperation, repeat the anguish, revisit the fear, speak cruelly to themselves inside their own mind, convince themselves they are alone, that they will not make it, that everything is bigger than it truly is. And then peace begins to fade, not only because the season is hard, but because the inner world stopped being a shelter and became an extension of the storm. Guarding inner peace does not mean becoming indifferent. It means refusing to make your own interior a partner to what is already hurting you. It means rejecting unnecessary amplification. It means interrupting with firmness the tendency to worsen inwardly what is already difficult enough outwardly. And that brings us to something essential in hard genies. Your mind needs direction, not total freedom. Because a mind left loose in the middle of pain tends to run toward extremes. It imagines catastrophes, relives scenes, creates predictions, searches for answers it does not have, repeats questions it cannot solve. And the more you hand over all leadership to the automatic flow of thoughts, the farther peace drifts away. That is why one of the most concrete ways to overcome hard times is to learn how to direct your attention, to return to what is possible now, to return to what is real now, to return to what is within your reach now. This may seem small, but it is deeply transformative. There are moments when you will not be able to solve the entire month, the entire situation, the entire life, but perhaps you can carry the next few hours with dignity. Perhaps you can move through the day without feeding more suffering than necessary. Perhaps you can take care of your breathing, your mental posture, the tone with which you speak to yourself. Perhaps you can stop consuming more noise than your soul can bear. Perhaps you can choose silence, where before you would have chosen more confusion. And it is these seemingly discreet choices that begin to rebuild your center, because inner peace does not always return in one grand moment of revelation. Many times, it returns through small acts of invisible protection. Seneca understood that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and that phrase becomes especially important when life tightens around you, because in difficult times, imagination often becomes a cruel amplifier. The problem already exists, but the mind wants to add even worse versions of it. It wants to make sure nothing escapes fear. It wants to simulate every future pain, so it will not be caught off guard. But that effort comes at a high cost. It drains energy, steals presence, weakens the body, exhausts the heart. That is why preserving peace is not only a spiritual gesture, it is also a gesture of emotional intelligence. You were not made to carry both the weight of reality and the weight of dozens of imagined futures at the same time. There are seasons in which wisdom is not found in thinking more. It is found in interrupting the excess. It is found in saying to yourself, this is already hard enough. I will not help this suffering grow inside me. And notice the power of that decision. It does not deny the pain, but it refuses to cooperate with chaos. And the one who learns not to cooperate with chaos has already begun to overcome it. Another point many people understand far too late is that inner peace is not preserved only by resolving outer conflicts. It is also preserved in the way you treat yourself during hardship. How many people, on top of the problem they are facing, still carry a cruel inner voice? A voice that accuses, pressures, humiliates, demands perfect strength, demands immediate clarity, condemns any tiredness as weakness. And then the person suffers twice. They suffer from the situation, and they suffer from the brutal way they treat themselves within it. But a soul attacked by the world does not need more attacks coming from inside. It needs firmness, yes, but also dignity. It needs truth, but not violence. In hard chemise, perhaps one of the noblest attitudes you can have is this: do not abandon yourself inwardly. Do not treat yourself like an enemy just because you are tired. Do not conclude that you are failing just because you are feeling. Do not assume you have lost your strength just because there were days when pain spoke louder. Inner peace is born from this too, from the ability to remain a shelter for yourself while life has not yet improved. And that is not weakness. That is deep maturity. Because many times, what sustains someone through a difficult crossing is not the absence of suffering, but the presence of a more compassionate and lucid relationship with themselves. There is also a quiet truth that can completely change the way you move through this moment. You do not need to understand everything right now in order not to lose your peace. Much anguish is born from the obsession with immediate meaning. The mind wants closed explanations, quick conclusions, guarantees. It wants to know why this happened, when it will end, what comes next, what all of it means. And when those answers do not appear, restlessness grows. But there are seasons of life that first need to be lived with dignity before they can be understood with clarity. There are pains whose meaning only appears later. There are changes that reveal their usefulness only after they have already transformed us within. So, perhaps the peace you are looking for right now is not in understanding everything. Perhaps it is in accepting that you do not yet understand everything and still refusing to despair in the face of the incomplete. That is very powerful, because it returns your energy to the next step. And the next step, when life is difficult, is worth more than grand theories. The next step is preserving your consciousness from unnecessary exaggeration. It is choosing not to intoxicate yourself with more noise. It is continuing to be truthful, just, present, and minimally disciplined, even while the bigger picture is still open. And there is something else Stoicism teaches with almost unsettling force. The world can be in disorder without you needing to enter disorder with it. That sentence sounds simple, but it contains immense power, because many people live as though it were inevitable to copy inwardly the chaos they are living through outwardly. If the environment is difficult, they become internally chaotic. If the season is uncertain, they become internally uncontrolled. If life is harsh, they begin treating themselves harshly. But it does not have to be this way. You can live through an unstable period and still build a stable way of standing within it. There can be noise outside and presence inside. There can be loss outside and dignity inside. There can be delay outside and patience inside. This is one of the great silent victories of maturity. Not allowing the condition of the world to automatically determine the condition of your soul. And perhaps that is exactly what defines the true meaning of overcoming hard times. It is not emerging from them untouched, without marks, without pain, without fatigue. It is emerging from them without having lost what was most valuable within you. Because in the end, this is the great battle. Not only solving the problem, but preserving the center. Not only waiting for better days, but remaining dignified while they do not arrive. Not only enduring the pain, but preventing it from becoming identity, dominant voice, permanent filter of reality. And that requires practice. It requires vigilance. It requires a renewed decision not to hand over your peace to the first impulse, the first piece of bad news, the first fear that appears. Sometimes that decision will be breathed in silence. Sometimes it will be made by stepping back from the excess of information. Sometimes it will be the courage not to feed a destructive thought. Sometimes it will be the humility to accept that today, one step at a time is enough. But in all of those moments, something much greater is happening. You are teaching your soul that it does not need to dissolve just because life has become difficult. And that lesson is forever. Maybe right now, you are exactly in the middle of one of those crossings. Maybe things have not yet been resolved. Maybe there are still unanswered questions, open fears, pains that have not passed. But even so, something can begin today. The decision not to lose yourself inside the struggle. The decision to protect your peace as something sacred, not as an optional luxury. The decision to understand that your interior cannot be open ground for every storm. Because when a person learns this, something changes deeply. They remain human. They keep feeling. They continue to be touched by life, but they no longer surrender, they suffer, but they do not abandon themselves. They cry, but they do not dissolve. They face chaos, but they do not allow chaos become their inner language. And when that happens, a kind of strength is born that makes no noise, yet holds everything together. A strength that does not depend on ease, but on presence. A peace that does not depend on absolute control, but on depth. And perhaps that is the greatest victory anyone can achieve in hard times. Continuing to belong to themselves, even when life seems determined to take that away. Because the moment you preserve that center, you have already begun to overcome.